Hello everyone, this is part 34 of What If Naruto and Hinata trained together and a spark happened, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Naruto Uzumaki responded nervously to the knock on his door, quickly pulling on a t-shirt. He had been preparing for bed, and was not expecting anyone. The duels were the next morning, so the blonde Tokubutsu Jonin was understandably on edge. Despite his apprehension, he opened the door without hesitating, or even asking whom it was. He was quite surprised to find Hinata Hyuga on the other side of the door, holding both of her bags. The young man briefly suspected another trick, having been subjected to a handful of annoyances throughout the past week. But her scent was real, as was her chakra aura, so he stepped back to let her enter. Hey, Hinata, he was still surprised by his girlfriend's visit. What's up? I was hoping I could stay here tonight, she said shyly. I'm done training with Shizune for tomorrow, and I have troubled her enough. But I still can't go home, and I wanted to be by you anyway. I tried to call, but. Of course you can stay here. He took her larger bag and locked the door, and my phone is unplugged so I can make sure I get a good night's sleep. She frowned slightly at him. Oh, I've gotten wrong number, calls almost every night since I got back, he told her, walking over to the closer love seat and setting her bag on it, almost like someone doesn't want me getting a good. Holy shit, Hinata. When he turned back to her, he discovered his beloved had shed her clothes and was standing there in her underwear. Except underwear wasn't the right word. He had seen her normal underwear often enough, even if had they never gone any further. No, even if was still essentially a bra and panties, this was lingerie, deep blue, more lace than cloth, barely covering anything, and designed to enhance and present rather than support. Hi, Hinata, he stammered and she blushed, but also smiled happily at having provoked that response from him. She closed the distance between him and him. Hinata, what are you doing? He finally found words when she released his lips. It is time, Naruto, she said as aggressively as she could manage. Despite all her progression, it was taking every ounce of courage she could muster not to run into his bedroom and hide. I don't want to wait any longer, she continued breathily. Make love to me, Naruto. He turned away from her, his mind reeling. Hinata, we can't. He marshaled every bit of respect he had for her, and pushed down his hormones. But she didn't make it easy for him. She embraced him from behind, pressing her impressive chest firmly into his back. Hinata was glad he wasn't looking at her, and thus couldn't see how much her face was burning. Why not? She countered. We're adults. We've waited longer than any of our friends. Don't you want to? Don't you want me? Her voice fell, worried. Part of her attack was just that, but there was no small amount of genuine fear in her words. He grabbed her hands, but did not face her, afraid his resolve would break. I do want you, Hinata, he told her fiercely, and then continued more calmly, so much it hurts. But not tonight, not like this. Why not? She asked again. Because we're both worried about tomorrow, and we both need to be well rested, he answered. It isn't exactly the mood I wanted, and I don't want to mess up in the duel because I was up late. Or mess our first time up because I'm distracted. But what if this is the last chance we have? She pressed her face into his back, trying not to cry, logic cracking her seductive mask. Is that what this is all about? Naruto asked softly, placing his hands together. A cloud of newspapers filled Hinata's arms as he used Shunshin to teleport to the other side of the room. He turned to face her with a disapproving frown. If that's why you're doing this, he told her angrily, there is no way we're doing anything tonight. Naruto. She was worried by his change in demeanor, so he walked back over to her, and touched her cheek adoringly, though his expression only softened a little bit. I don't want you going into this fight thinking it's okay if you lose, because at least we had one night together, he told her firmly, but more gently as well, and the same goes for me. I want both of us fighting tomorrow for our first time. And not just for making love, he ran his finger down her jaw. Fight so I can touch your face. He wrapped his fingers in hers, to hold hands. He moved his hand from her face to the small of her back, not completely able to ignore her state of undress, and spun her as he said, dancing. He put his face to hers, gently massaging her lips with his own, and as he broke away whispered, "K. Oh gods, Naruto," she exhaled, "please don't stop." "No," he told her, keeping her close, "soon, but not tonight. Not like this." "All right," she sighed, resting her head on his chest. "Get dressed," he said, "and we can go to bed." She looked up at him with a mildly amused expression. "Just to sleep," he told her, fully clothed. "And maybe with an extra sheet between us." She disengaged from him regretfully, with a nod. She collected her bag, aware of his eyes watching her. She couldn't keep all the redness from her cheeks, but managed a saunter nevertheless as she walked into his bathroom. Naruto's eyes cruised down her flawless back, resting none too briefly on her round yet well-muscled buttocks, then along her lean legs. "Oh man, I am such an idiot," he mumbled to himself, as she disappeared behind the closing door. Hinata rejoined him a few minutes later wearing a more comfortable and functional ensemble consisting of a camisole and a pair of loose shorts. She looked more natural and relaxed but no less attractive, and Uzumaki decided in some ways it was more appealing than the overly seductive ensemble. "I love you, Hinata," he embraced her again, "and I'm sorry." "It's okay," she held him tightly, "you were probably right. I love you, too." In the end, despite Naruto's insistence they go straight to sleep, they shared more than a few K before drifting into the dreams. When the alarm went off, Naruto and Hinata found that they had somehow moved into a spooning position while they slept. Hinata was curled up inside Naruto, and gripping his arms where they were wrapped around her. As they awoke, their actions naturally mirrored one another without a need to discuss it. Naruto went into the kitchen to prepare breakfast, while Hinata showered and attired herself for battle. She joined him in her shozaku, ginmaki already secured about her wrists. After partaking of the apple cinnamon waffles, ham, and pan-fried potato cubes, he moved to the bathroom to prepare while she cleaned up. Still having time to kill when they were both ready, the couple took the long route to the open-air arena, both trying to hide their nerves. The first Saturday in September dawned clear and cool. The arena was already half full, even though Hinata and Naruto arrived over an hour early. Naruto's duel was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m., but the couple entered the stadium, hand in hand, at 8:47 a.m. Hyuga watched the young couple warily as they entered the Hokage's box to report their arrival. The walk and the company had calmed them, and they greeted their three hosts with easy resolve. Tsunade had invited Hiashi and the Hyuga elders to share her private seating, which had one of the best views and a degree of privacy. And all seven of them were already present. Hiroko smiled slightly at her grandniece, and Hiashi stood to hug his daughter and shake Naruto's hand. The blonde youth looked out over the crowd, seeing more than a few familiar faces. In fact, the first people he saw were Kakashi, Yugao, Rei, Sakura, and Lee, all in the row just in front of the Hokage's box. He doubted their positioning was an accident, and Hinata squeezed his hand when she noticed where he was looking. Her eyes drifted further than his, and saw Temari and Shikamaru near the front, and Shizune a few empty seats away from them. She did not see Neji and Tenten. "You two are to use the eastern locker room," Tsunade informed them. "When your matches are up, it will be announced over the PA. Good luck." Their former teacher tried to signal them with her eyes, wanting to appear at least partially impartial for Hyuga. "Neji isn't here," Hinata whispered to Naruto as they made their way to the locker room. "What if Temari is right? Then you'll finally get to kick Neji's butt," he told her intensely. Then he settled slightly, and added, "But Tenten isn't here either, so maybe they decided not to get here too early. I mean, Ino and Choji weren't out there either, right? And I didn't see Kiba or Hanabi either. It could still be your sister." He squeezed her hand again and reassured her, "Don't worry, Hinata. You can handle this, I know you can. You aren't the same girl who Neji defeated 4 years ago. If it is Neji, you won't need me to help you stand up to him this time. But I'm still here for you." Naruto stepped onto the floor of the arena, reassured by the familiarity. Naruto Uzumaki, Duke Ruajaku Iken, Tsunade called for their attention. "The loser will be the first of you to be incapacitated, to be forced out of the arena, or to surrender. Other than that, anything goes, but try not to kill or maim one another, okay?" Naruto finally looked at his opponent, and his jaw dropped. The land of Silver Noble was a few inches taller than Naruto, and thickly muscled. The Jonin wore a long-sleeved black shozaku, but had a chain mail vest over the top. He also had a long sword and short sword strapped to each hip, and a heavy hexagon shield strapped to his back. But that was not what made the young man pause. Ruajaku's face was thin and pinched, with deep wrinkles around his eyes and mouth. His stark white hair was noticeably thinning, and pulled back into a ponytail. He was quite obviously older than Hiashi or even Hiroko Hyuga, though possibly a few years younger than Hyuta. Once he was done boggling, Naruto felt a renewed rage towards Hinata's grandfather. I am sorry to have to do this to you, young man, the Jonin addressed him, but you should have known your place. We'll see who's gonna be sorry. Naruto roared, redirecting his anger at Hyuta to his opponent. That is the man you chose for my daughter. Hiashi protested, having never seen the noble before, he is old enough to be her grandfather. Behind him, the newly arrived Hanabi nodded in spite of herself. Age is irrelevant, Hyuta sniffed, he is of a superior lineage, and we are fortunate his first two wives were unable to provide him with an heir. Just before Naruto reached Ruajaku, the Jonin shifted his right foot and flashed the hand sign for dog. A wire mesh net flipped out of the ground and wrapped the teen. The attached cord snapped back, carrying Uzumaki into the air and then dashing him into a rocky section of the floor at high speed. The Duke drew the longsword on his left hip in his right hand, and placed the tip against the small of Naruto's back. Yield, the older ninja asked. Naruto mumbled something angrily in response, and Ruajaku frowned, prompting, what was that? I said, Rasengan. Naruto erupted, turning over. The sphere carved through the net, and the blonde Tokujo matched the sphere to the point of the sword, pushing upwards. Nearly half of the blade was ground away before the Jonin retreated. He frowned at the now concave end of the weapon, and then slid it back into the sheath. That was a very expensive sword, from the finest swordsmith in the land of Earth, Ruajaku told Naruto with an air of annoyance. If you were that worried about it, you shouldn't have brought it to a fight, Uzumaki snapped back, besides you have 3 left. The youth darted in again and the Duke drew back in response, hopping slightly at the end. Naruto thought his opponent's slight jump was to increase his speed, but was proven wrong when he stepped on the tripwire. The attached paper bombs exploded, sending a mass of dirt and stones flying into his head and upper body from either side. A fist-sized chunk of rock hit the teen's cheek, bloodying it, but the injury had completely vanished before he had finished brushing himself off. The Tokujo regarded the Jonin more warily, and did not advance. I'm not so impressed by the traps, Naruto told him, looking around carefully, but I'm wondering when you had time to set them all up. You have not scratched the surface of my preparations, the Mines ninja announced over the angry rumbling in the crowd. Most of the shinobi and civilians of the Konohagakure were not happy about the inequity in the duel. Even Hanabi Hyuga scared at the Duke's statement, earning her a slight smile from her father. Maybe not, but I can change that real quick, Naruto countered, placing his hands together before announcing, multi-shadow clone jutsu. Dozens of Naruto spread out over the floor of the arena. They were caught by snares, fell into pits, and were destroyed by flying blades, stronger paper bombs, clouds of poison gas and acid, and even a handful of earth jutsu seals that created oversized bear traps. With each ruse activated, Ruajaku's face grew paler. Finally, the last 2 clones signaled all clear and merged back into their creator. You may have dealt with most of my traps, the Duke blustered, drawing his remaining longsword and one of his short swords, but your chakra must be nearly expended. I take it you haven't heard of me, Naruto smirked as he drew Kitsune, I create 20 times that many clones for light training. But if you want to try swordplay, let's do it. Ruajaku started speaking as he swung his lighter blade at Naruto's eyes. Base, the land of silver nobles said while Kitsune drove his short sword high and then darted back to block his longsword stab at the teen's left knee. Deception, the Duke continued, feinting with his right hand blade. Will not, the foreign Jonin voice fluctuated when he grimaced as Naruto kicked aside his false strike, leaving the Tokujo ready to tag the older man's shoulder with the tip of the staff blade. Fool. Ruajaku bit off the word as he swung both of his blades inward and parallel to the ground. His left arm stung from Naruto's successful blow, but he tried to keep his short sword on course. Me, The older warrior finished with another frown as the teen caught both his weapons with Kitsune, and then pushed him back. Naruto dropped Kitsune as soon as there was space, and signed quickly. Spark darts, Naruto exclaimed, sending 5 spikes of electricity after his opponent, and then summoned Kitsune back to his hand before the staff blade hit the ground. Wind screen, the Jonin countered, but the barrier of wind chakra only stopped 4 of the bolts. The last collided with his longsword, numbing his right arm. Nor will your cheap and dirty style of fighting defeat me, the noble added contemptuously. Naruto frowned at him in exasperated confusion. What does that mean? The teen queried. You combine ninjutsu and taijutsu with your weapon's form, without any care for honor or style, Ruajaku answered imperiously, not that that toy can truly be called a weapon. What the heck are you talking about? Naruto looked even more bewildered. That is why you are not a Jonin, nor will you ever be, the Duke informed him. A Jonin must be a master of discrete styles. The microphones around the arena picked up his words and carried them to the crowd, and once more, a derisive din arose from the audience. None of that matters in a real fight, Naruto shot back, and what do you know about me, anyway? You are low-bred, low-class shinobi, the elder Jonin explained as if speaking to a child. Your father is unknown, and your mother was from a family of writers. And on top of that, the only reason you have attained the rank you have, is due to the Hokage's favoritism towards you. Both Hiashi and Tsunade turned to look at Hyuta. The Hyuga clan leader shook his head in disappointment, while the Sannin smirked confidently. Pretty much, Naruto agreement came out as a vicious growl, but you forgot the most important part of my resume. Naruto's whisker marks stood out until they peeled away from his face. His mouth lengthened into a muzzle, and his fingers sprouted claws. The Duke stepped back twice quickly from the unannounced change. Naruto's skin erupted a thick coat of yellow fur, and his ears shifted higher and grew sharp points. He snarled broadly, showing the now extended canines in his vulpine mouth. Ruajaku placed his hands together, and began repeatedly chanting, "Release." Naruto's tail ripped through the back of his pants, and for good measure, he formed the 2 silver chakra extensions to match. His transformation complete, he activated a genjutsu he has just mastered. I'm also the Jinchuriki of the 9 Tails Fox Demon, he whispered harshly, and due to the illusion, his opponent was the only one who heard him. The noble fell backwards, trying to get away. Uzumaki was honestly surprised by his opponent's response, but kept his visage murderous. For good measure, Naruto summoned the Fuyuten Raisin Blade around Kitsune. He attempted to turn the chakra sword red as the Kyuubi had done, but could not. Instead, he settled for doubling the length and tripling the width of the extension. The result was unwieldy for combat, and somewhat unstable, but the psychological effect was as he hoped. The Duke scrambled back to his feet, smelling of fear and sweat. The Ascendant Fox lightly dropped the tip of his weapon, and it easily tore a massive furrow in the dirt and stone. Ruajaku had had enough. He turned heedlessly and ran out of the arena. The stadium fell silent, the observers befuddled en masse. Naruto watched the Mind's Jonin go warily, but there was no duplicity in the frightened retreat. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki, Tsunade announced, settling her back in her chair with a look of smug satisfaction. What was that? Hiashi demanded of his father, but the Sannin spoke first. Ruajaku is a technical Jonin, the Hokage answered, after making sure the PA was off, and a lousy poker player, too. He has been since the first time I met him, and I didn't expect that fact had changed. And you wanted him to marry my daughter. Hiashi snapped, as if the age difference wasn't bad enough, you chose a technical Jonin. It wasn't as if the matchmaker had his shinobi dossier, Hyuta sniffed defensively, she provided his bloodline and rank. Guy-sensei, what is a technical Jonin? Lee leaned forward to ask his mentor. Even with the loudspeaker off, the few rows around the Hokage's box could hear the conversation. An archaic and highly insulting term for a sort of Jonin that should not exist, the Jonin answered pompously. And that doesn't tell them anything, Guy. Kakashi shook his head at his friend, though he also did not say anything more. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura prompted, and the Jonin sighed. You both just went through the Jonin trials a few months ago, so you understand that it is a test of your skills, right? Both teens nodded. Well, it is a technical test, not a practical one, Hitaki expounded. The Chunin exams and the Shinobi's village are expected to handle the practical side of the equation, but sometimes they fail in that respect. As a result, From time to time, certain people pass the trials and are promoted to jonin, even though they are lacking in combat experience, coping mechanisms, or the like. That sort of shinobi is called a technical jonin. But why would a village promote someone like that? Sakura asked, offended by the idea. The shinobi in question might have money or political influence. Kakashi indicated the arena floor, though sometimes it is done to honor a teacher for exemplary service. Or it could just be a clerical error, someone mixed up the files. And some villages do it to inflate their jonin ranks, to appear stronger. Ruijaku is one of 2 dukes in the Land of Silver. Tsunade had moved to the railing to join the conversation, which means, depending on the tides of influence, he is either the 2nd or 3rd most powerful man in that nation. He's too valuable to send into the mines on rescue missions or to deal with earthbound spirits, or to dispatch to the border to fight bandits. But he also has the money to hire all of the best tutors. So, he has the skills, but no real experience. And he has probably never been really challenged either. His personality isn't the type to take it well, so his trainers go easy on him, if they want to keep their jobs. Anyway, back to work, she grinned at her pink-haired apprentice, and then triggered the PA again. Knucklehead, get out of there so we can reset the arena, she ordered him. Naruto had reverted to normal, but remained on the stadium floor. Her announcement sent a wave of confused muttering through the audience. Normally the floor was not reset until the damage was much worse. As Naruto moved to join his team in the stands, Genin and Chunin repair crew moved in, using earth, water, and fire techniques to remove the pits in Naruto's gouge from the floor, while healers restored the small stand of trees from the bombs and blades that had injured them. The match between Hinata Hyuga and Neji Hyuga will begin in 20 minutes, the Hokage concluded. When the Hokage's voice, piped into the locker room, announced Naruto's victory, Hinata's heart soared. Though she would never have admitted it, she had been worried for her paramour. A small part of her was still concerned he might have been injured in the fight, but she pushed the fear aside. She couldn't afford it. Besides, the young woman told the wall, with Naruto's regeneration, it doesn't really matter how much he gets beat up, right? Knucklehead, get out of there so we can reset the arena. Tsunade's voice sprang up again. The match between Hinata Hyuga and Neji Hyuga will begin in 20 minutes. Hinata's breath caught in her throat, and her hands trembled. Neji, she whispered. Her cousin was the acknowledged genius, who learned the clan's primary techniques all by himself. He was one of only 2 jonin in the last 3 generations of Hyuga shinobi. No matter what she had learned, or what Naruto said, she was not certain she could defeat him. And part of her wasn't sure she wanted to. Neji's father died to save hers, because she could not stop the Cloud Ninja had tried to kidnap her. She somehow felt she owed him for that. And she felt her cousin would make a good leader for the clan. Naruto's face appeared in Hinata's mind. Not his happy, energetic face, but his kind, loving face. She remembered what she was fighting for, not just for her love life, but also for how far she had advanced, and for her own freedom. Hinata resolved herself, unconsciously tightening the top strap on her left-hand coat. She had promised her beloved she would do her best, she had promised herself she would do her best. If Neji wins, I will not begrudge him his victory, she decided firmly, but I will not go down without a fight. Do you think Hinata can beat Neji? Sakura asked nervously. The seats beside her had been filled by Ino, with Choji on his lover's other side, however the space next to Yugao had been empty, so Naruto had plopped down there. He was still frowning after his match, not pleased by how he won, yet unable to refute the results. But he raised his head and grinned at his teammate's question. Of course she can, Uzumaki insisted, without a hint of doubt on his face. Nothing against Hinata, Lee shook his head, for she has come very far. But I do not believe she can defeat Neji. He is a jonin, while she is only a Tokubutsu jonin. Neji also has the advantage in strength and speed. You're kidding me, bushy brow, Naruto shot back. Hinata knows all the Hyuga clan tricks, and how to counter them. She's got Neji's number. Plus there's no way Neji's faster than Hinata. Then I guess we shall see. Rock Lee did not sound convinced, and Kakashi looked unsure as well. The cousins stepped onto opposite sides of the field, each observing the other. Neji could not help but be surprised by the rigid resolve in Hinata's eyes and in the set of her shoulders. And Hinata could feel Neji's sadness, and also his lack of doubt. Her eyes also studied the poleum he carried. The sputum had a 6-foot wooden staff, topped with a 2-foot-long, 5-inch broad shortsword. And where the two met there were 2 crescent blades, one facing forward the other facing backwards. Hinata Hyuga, Neji Hyuga, the leader of the Leaf Shinobi, addressed the near siblings. The rules of this duel are the same as the previous battle. The winner will be the first of you to incapacitate your opponent, to force your opponent out of the arena, or to make your opponent surrender. Begin. Hinata pushed off before Tsunade finished the second syllable of the command. She opened a channel to Ginmaki, manifesting the lightning blades. As she took her third step, she started signing. Doton, Stone Claw's Jutsu. She incanted, and a half-dozen hands formed out of the rocks in the earth around Neji. The Jonin leapt forward, but one of the hands caught his robes. He swung his weapon down, cutting himself free, and completing the rotation so the blade was facing Hinata. He hopped forward to meet her, jabbing lightly towards her stomach. She caught the blade of the spear with her left bracha, and turned it away from her. She took another step forward, keeping the pole blade against her forearm guard, and brought the sharp extension of her other weapon down on the haft. Suton, Shield of Storms, Neji proclaimed, and a layer of thick mist sprang up around the wooden pole, preventing her from cutting through it. He spun the sputum away, jabbing the back end into Hinata's ribs. The Tokujo tried to dodge, but she was too close, and part of her breath was driven from her lungs. She placed her forearm against the reverse end of the spear, and slid closer to Neji, stabbing towards his upper back. He dropped away, swinging his foot up towards her stomach. Hinata countered with a crescent kick, tagging his thigh, forcing his leg away, and trying to put him off balance. The Jonin drove his palm into the earth, and used the new point of stability to launch his other foot up, catching her right elbow. His momentum carried him around the spear, and when he landed, he quickly freed the weapon and pointed it at his cousin. She took a defensive stance, watching him carefully. His technique was still rough, she could tell that much. But the sputum gave him a great advantage in reach, and with his superior strength, he could guide her around the battlefield. Her coat style did not have a method of dealing with polyams beyond, break them or disarm them. His jutsu had prevented the former, and she was not sure if she could achieve the latter. On the other hand, she thought, Ginmaki might not be able to cut through that defense, but that doesn't mean there isn't another way. Neji moved again while she was considering her options. He charged in, sliding his hands further back on the sputum's shaft, increasing the range at the cost of being slightly off balance. Hinata started to sidestep again, but Neji stopped before he passed her, and rotated. 8 trigrams, Celestial Roar, he announced, channeling his chakra into the spear as he spun. The speed of his technique caused the heft of the weapon to hum loudly. Hinata braced her arms in front of her, catching the spinning sword blade on both braces. The strength of his technique threw her to the side, and she tumbled to the ground. He jumped forward preparing to pin her down. Hinata placed her hands to the dirt, and swung her feet out, channeling her chakra out through them. 8 trigrams souls, heavenly spin, she stated as the unexpected sphere knocked the airborne Neji back. She shifted her weight backwards from her handstand, somersaulting back to an upright position. He was already attacking again, stabbing out with seemingly reckless abandon. But as she slid to the side, he quickly reversed his weapon, pulling it back towards his real target. How much do you know about Ginmaki? Tenten asked slowly, as Neji leaned on the practice sputum, panting heavily. I know that Naruto forged the coat for my cousin, he answered, and they are her primary weapon. Beyond that I know little, I have not had much chance to see them in action, nor have I had reason to ask Hinata about them. The weapons mistress nodded. It was redundant to send 2 Hyugas on most missions, so Hinata, Neji, and Hanabi did not work together often. Why? He prompted, doubting his lover-turned-trainer had mentioned his opponent's braces idly. Tenten mulled over the question, torn once again between her currently conflicted loyalties and responsibilities. If you can't tell me, I won't pressure you, Neji told her, trying to sound reassuring. I can't tell you about the jutsus Naruto placed in Ginmaki, she finally said, but about coat in general, you should remember that they are designed for defense. On the other hand, don't underestimate them because of it. And I can't tell you about how Ginmaki is secured. But if you could find some way to remove the braces it would hurt Hinata's offense and her defense at the same time. Neji had caught notice of the 3 leather straps on the underside of the coat early on, and he made his move. As he drew his palm back, he aimed the rear-facing crescent at Hinata's right arm. He slipped the blade between Ginmaki's support bar and Hinata's wrist, and yanked back, sending some extra chakra to his muscles. With a dull whine of scraping metal, the sputum cut through the straps. As the braca dropped away, Neji noticed first the series of cuts on his cousin's arm, and second that the head of the sputum was chipped and dull where it had scraped against the coat, while Ginmaki remained unmarked. It seems I have underestimated Naruto's skills as a crafter, the Hyuga Jonin decided silently. If he is still speaking to me after today, I should ask for his assistance in forging Tenten's wedding present. Hinata dove for the fallen braca, but before she could reach it, Neji caught it in the guard of the sputum, and launched it into the crowd, straight for Naruto. Hinata's paramour caught the armor piece with a grimace. By moving it into the audience, Neji had made it impossible for his cousin to physically recover the weapon. She could have summoned it back, but that would have taken precious moments and chakra, and that was not counting the time to find a way to secure it. The Jonin took a few steps back, signing. His opponent regained her feet, and started to close the distance, but he completed his jutsu first. Suten, Polar Globe's jutsu, he called out quietly, and 5 1-foot diameter spheres shot at Hinata. She cut through the first with the electric extension of her remaining braca, but the second struck her right shoulder with the power of a moderate punch, and remained there. As the third hit the right side of her abdomen, the second sphere had started to freeze, and was spreading over her chest and down her arm. She was already shivering as she knocked away the fourth sphere with the main body of Ginmaki. But the ice from the second and third orbs had merged as the final ball of water struck her right hip. Most of the right side of her body was trapped, the frost spread down to her knee and elbow, and even partly encasing her neck. She managed to bring her hands together as Neji reclaimed his spear and started to move forward. Mi, Hitsuji, Saru, I, Uma, Tora, Fireball Jutsu, Hinata brought her left hand to her mouth, and exhaled a weak cloud of flame. Sakura and Naruto exchanged confused glances. Hinata's mastery of the technique had been much stronger in their last team practice. Her intent became clear as she turned the fire on her frozen side. The ice melted under the assault, while her skin reddened and her flame retardant uniform charred slightly. She broke free just in time to block Neji's shallow slash at her stomach. Hinata grabbed hold of the staff with her right hand as she absorbed the blow with Ginmaki, but Neji turned over the weapon, tearing it from her grasp before she could capitalize. He jabbed again, and Hinata swayed out of the way, blocking his reversal blow with both of her palms. The Jonin grimaced slightly as his next 4 attacks were easily avoided or deflected even while she shivered occasionally. He recognized the Whipping Willow's style, and shifted his attacks. He swung at her eyes, and then aimed a kick at her still stiff right shoulder. She ducked under the sputum's blade, and pushed aside his leg at the thigh, sending out a small amount of chakra to damage the muscle. He took the minor blow without complaint, and spun his palm around so she had to lean back to prevent both sides from hitting her neck in succession. This was what Neji had been waiting for. He continued to pivot the sputum, but changed its angle. Off balance, and lacking a clear view with her Byakugan inactive, Hinata could not do anything as the back end of the spear struck her knees. She tumbled to the ground, landing facing him. "I am sorry, Hinata," Neji whispered as he stabbed the blunt end of the palm fiercely at her forehead. But his apology was premature. Hinata brought her hand together as the staff approached her face. Time seemed to slow down, and the Jonin recognized her movement was in vain. The bludgeon would hit her before she could stop it. And for the second time in 2 heartbeats, he realized he had underestimated Hinata, as the clouds of chakra in each of her palms coalesced and merged. "Rasengan," she said victoriously, as the sphere shredded the wooden haft of the weapon. The short portion of the staff, on the near side of the Rasengan no longer had support, and was thrown upwards by the spiraling orb. She released the sphere with her right hand, while at the same time expanding it. As the fourth Hokage's jutsu chewed away at the oak haft of the sputum, Hinata also sent chakra to her eyes, activating her Suijin Byakugan, determined not to be caught off guard again. Neji hopped backwards to avoid losing any more of his weapon. In the end, between the broken part that had just crested and was starting to fall, and sawdust littering the floor, he had lost over 3 feet of the staff of the weapon. His sputum had been reduced to a short sword with an odd crosspiece and an extra long handle. Hinata kept up, and caught the falling stick in her right hand, taking a new fighting stance, holding her trophy like a club and with the Rasengan in her left hand. Neji examined her. Hinata had taken more, harder hits than she had given, but she was not showing it. Her shivers were gone, and though her knees must have hurt, she held her stance evenly. Though he had come to care for his near sister, this was the first time he felt he could follow her as leader of the clan. But it's too late for that now, he told her, drawing a look of confusion. I won't lose. He threw the sputum at her like a javelin, and while she ruined the weapon with the Rasengan, he withdrew his tonfas from under his robe. Though the wooden and metal bars were not of the quality of ginmaki, they were imbued with a few tricks and were sturdier than the sputum had been. Neji darted forward, swinging with his right arm. His confidence was rewarded when Hinata moved her Rasengan to intercept and the tonfa was deflected but not damaged. He swung his second weapon at her, and she raised the broken haft of the sputum to block. Neji sent a stream of chakra into the tonfa, and the simple wooden rod splintered and shattered from the increased impact. Hinata fell back, divesting herself of both the broken stick and the Rasengan. Her hands moved with incredible speed, and she was signing her second jutsu even as her first left her fingertips. Spark darts, she incanted, following it with Doton, fault line jutsu. 7 barbs of electricity flew towards Neji, and before he could dodge, the ground started to buck and shake under him. He drove his left tonfa to the ground to steady himself, and spun his right hand bar to absorb the lightning jutsu. As soon as he was stable, the Hyuga Jonin darted forward. He scissored his tonfa, and aimed for her neck. She caught the attack on her remaining coat, but was forced back and left open for a quick kick to the ribs. She blocked it with her right forearm, but her cousin was still at the advantage in both strength and leverage, and pain shot up her arm. She took small comfort in knowing that it would have been worse to get hit in the torso. Hinata pushed away as hard as she could, signing again. Doton, Earth Skipper's jutsu. Hinata cradled her injured arm slightly as 2 flat stones wrenched themselves from the dirt, and bounced towards Neji. He smashed them with his weapons, and in that instant, she slid back in and stabbed her glowing fingertip into his elbow. His grip on his right hand bludgeon loosened. He swung his left hand weapon at her head, nearly clipping her chin, and then tucked both tonfas under his stunned arm. He hit the same pressure point she had, restoring his nerves and chakra flow. The Jonin jabbed at her with his newly restored arm, so she could not land another blow and so he could recover the weapons trapped in his between his bicep and his rib. Hinata was already moving through a new set of hand seals, but Neji was not about to let her use another jutsu. He aimed his attacks at her wrists. She was able to shift without stopping, causing him to miss her right arm and hit ginmaki on her left. She also was able to spare a thread of chakra for her coat, sending a reverberation back through his tonfa. He dropped the weapon. Suten, water spout jutsu, she finished, launching a sphere of water at Neji. He struck it with his remaining bar, and it exploded, pushing him to his knees and soaking him. Ranshinsho, Hinata whispered, diving towards him. The purple lightning around her hands arced lightly to Neji's soaked clothes. But before she reached him, he dropped his other tonfa and drew his hands into his chest, before thrusting them out at her. 8 trigrams Mountain Crusher, Neji shouted, even though he purposely held back the full power of his jutsu. He cut the strength by a third, and softened the impact slightly, so as not to seriously injure his cousin. Instead, his intent became clear as Hinata was launched into the air towards the audience. Once she landed outside the arena, Neji would be the victor. The young woman tumbled through the air, her eyes fluttering in semi-consciousness. She reached the apex of her flight above the wall of the battlefield, and began to drop towards Tenten, as if she had been directed there. Hinata! Naruto roared angrily. Hinata! Naruto roared angrily. Sakura clasped her hands in front of her mouth fearfully, while Kakashi grimaced sadly. Tenten prepared to catch her friend, telling herself she should not feel guilty about the joy blossoming in her heart. What are you doing, Hinata? Naruto shouted the question less loudly, despair replacing the ire in his previous outburst. His words reached her this time, and her eyes snapped open. The action was more indicative of her restored focus than of a need to see. Her Suijin Byakugan was still active. Hinata Hyuga placed her hands together, summoning her chakra. Shadow Clone Jutsu, she said simply. Naruto's voice had inspired her to take a page from the beloved's playbook. The clone appeared below her and placed her palms to the bottoms of the original's boots, each pushing off the other. The duplicate began to fly even faster towards the crowd, while the real Hinata rocketed back towards the arena floor. The shadow replica disappeared just before it struck Tenten, and Hinata was completing another jutsu as she landed. Medical arts, accelerated healing jutsu, the silver-eyed woman incanted. In the same instant, she removed the lightning projection lingering around Ginmaki. She met Neji's gaze with a new expression. Instead of the grim determination she had shown earlier, she had a deep calm, and appraised him openly. It's about time you started fighting, Hinata, her boyfriend grumbled softly, even though she could not hear him. What do you think she was doing before? Lee asked, confused but cautiously smug. Sparring. What's that mean? Choji prompted curiously. She was trying not to hurt Neji, and overthinking her moves, Uzumaki explained, that's why she was relying too much on Ginmaki. She normally only uses the coat as a weapon when she's sparring, or if she needs to cut something. But I know that look, she's finally gonna fight him. Hinata assumed the gentle fist stance, even as full flexibility and strength returned to her knees. Neji did not want to give her any more chance to recover further. He snatched up both of his tonfa from the earth, and charged her. She caught the first spinning bar with her right hand, accepting the stinging pain to hold the tonfa. She pulled him in by the weapon, blocking the second tonfa incidentally with Ginmaki as her left hand stabbed at Neji's right lung, just under his rib cage. The Jonin braced for the stunning impact of the gentle fist, building up a massive chi into the chakra point she was targeting, and then stopping the energy flow in or out. It would not negate the effect of the gentle fist, but it would minimize the impact. At the last instant, Hinata's fingers curled, and she sent an extra spark of chakra through her muscles. Her fist drove into his gut, and his white eyes bulged as the breath was driven from his body. She released his tonfa, quickly tapping the thumb and index finger of his left hand as she did. Neji just barely managed to keep hold of his weapon with the 3 digits that were still functioning. He tried to retreat, spinning his right hand tonfa repeatedly to try to keep her at bay. I am sorry, my brother, Hinata paused, letting him gain space. I can't hold back any longer, so you shouldn't either. What do you mean, Hinata? He asked, trying to hide the kernel of worry that sprouted in his stomach. Short of techniques that would almost certainly kill or maim his cousin, he was not sure there was much more he could bring to the fight. Hinata did not answer with words. She jumped forward, aiming her hands at his neck. He expected a feint, so he blocked lightly while watching for her follow-up. Unfortunately, her attack was in earnest, and her left fist sent tingles up his left arm where he caught it, and her right arm clipped the side of his neck. Neji recognized that if he had not shifted to block the first blow, her second could have rendered him unconscious, speechless, or worse. He berated himself for blocking with his wrist instead of his tonfa. Why are you still using weapons? Hinata finally answered his query with one of her own. She opened her hands, and swung her fingertips at his shoulders. Neji dropped clumsily to avoid the attack, and aimed his undiminished right-hand weapon at her knee. She stepped into the attack, at the same time throwing the targeted joint towards his nose. The tonfa hit the heel of her boot, and her knee brushed his nose and cheek. You want me to use the gentle fist against you? He shook his head. That would be foolish of me, given the training you and Naruto have undertaken. Taijutsu is your specialty, she said, whether it is the gentle fist or another style. Your unarmed skill far surpasses your weapon's skill. And refusing to use your best techniques because I know a way to counter them, that is the more foolish choice. Neji restored his stunned left digits as she spoke, and the lecture stung. Still, he gripped his tonfas more tightly, determined not to be manipulated. He stepped towards her, swinging at her face and stabbing for her stomach simultaneously. Hinata back-fisted the spinning weapon with her left hand, using her chakra to protect her knuckles and increase the power of her attack. The tonfa in Neji's right hand gave off an unsettling crack as it reversed direction. She tried to reach past the second weapon to tag the arm holding it, but Neji dropped his arm and responded with a spinning kick to the small of her back. The blow staggered the young woman, but she used the impact to roll past him, swiftly rising to stab her fingers at his spine. Byakugan, Neji finally activated his Kekkei Genkai, and was amazed by the amount of chakra still left in her body. Since when do you have such expansive chakra reserves? he asked as he leaned away from her strikes, also swinging back his right-hand weapon to drive off her assault. Training with Naruto consistently for 16 months has many advantages, she answered, shifting her feet and stabbing again, remaining behind him, trying to keep up with his chakra supply has greatly increased my own limits. He nodded reflexively, rotating quickly to face her again. But Hinata was faster still, she tagged his left side and made sure her right arm remained in his blind spot. Neji took a quick tally, and realized it had been almost 2 years since he had actively worked out with his cousin. The last time he had done any sort of training with her was she had taught him the protection of the 8 trigrams 64 palms just over a year ago. Recently their interactions had been less business and more social. The Jonin suddenly somersaulted forward twice, trying to gain enough distance from the young woman to meet her head-on again. She was sufficiently surprised by his forward retreat, and he was able to turn around, if only just. Rasengan, she crafted the sphere again and darted after him. As Neji turned to face her, she was already thrusting the ball of energy towards him, and he was barely able to get his paired tonfus between himself and the orb. Though he had not been using his Byakugan earlier, he could still tell that this time the fourth Hokage's jutsu was denser and the chakra threads were moving faster. The Hyuga bloodline was better able to detect the edges of the Rasengan, so to his enhanced vision the spiraling sphere looked more like a 1,000-faceted jewel. Hinata pushed forward, and Neji dug in his feet, keeping the tonfus angled so she could neither force her way past, nor divert for attack any direction other than into the dirt. The wood and metal bars shook under the assault, and as the third second passed, a whine began to rise from his right weapon. He recalled with a moment of worry that it was the same weapon that had stopped her last Rasengan as well as the one she had punched. The chakra-reinforced oak outside splintered, and the orb began to both bend and grind away the first steel ribbon through the middle of the weapon. Rotation, Neji spun in desperation, trying to throw his cousin back. The Rasengan shattered the heavenly spin where they met, so the Hyuga technique never touched Hinata. The act did make her pause just long enough for him to back away. She released the Rasengan while Neji examined his ruined weapon with a growing hint of rage. He returned both tonfus to their hidden scabbard. Have it your way, he informed her, chakra lighting his fingers. He stepped forward, his hands darting independently at her shoulders. Hinata slid past his right arm, while attacking his left. Her right elbow impacted his forearm, throwing it aside, and then her other hand punched his elbow in turn. Neji grimaced at the hits, but was able to redirect his right strike, hitting her right B in the lung underneath. Chakra pulse, she quickly undid the effect of the gentle fist so that her regeneration technique could restore the shortness of breath she was already feeling. Hinata debated the merits of continuing the healing jutsu. Most of the damage that the simple technique could deal with was already gone, and it was starting to be a drain on her chakra supply. But if she kept mixing the tiger and heron with the gentle fist, she would need it to restore the damage that the aggressive style forced her to accept. And if she dropped the restorative spell, she might not have another chance to restore it. Despite her misgivings, she silently ended the jutsu. How fast can she form the Rasengan? Neji asked himself, is my heavenly spin faster? Hinata shifted her stance, bringing her feet closer together, even as she swung out both her hands at her cousin's right arm again. He dropped the targeted limb, and countered with a jab at her neck. She leaned back subtly, and at the same time pulled her own left elbow back, tagging his wrist. Neji was surprised as he felt the chakra point close down. His fingers darted forward again, bypassing the blockage he had just received. She shifted her body at the waist, causing his left hand to miss her shoulder, and tapped her palm to his, pushing his other hand wide as well. I see, Neji said, stepping back carefully. Before you were mixing the tiger style with the gentle fist, but now you are combining whipping willows and the gentle fist. She saw no need to respond, other than to angle one hand towards his gut and the other towards his neck. His response caught her off guard. He grabbed her wrists, threw himself backwards, planted his foot in her sternum, and flipped her over him. By the time Hinata managed to right herself so she could land on her feet, Neji had completed his role and was signing. Doton, Sand Trap Jutsu, he finished an instant before she landed, and the ground under her feet changed from hard-packed dirt to soft, shifting sand. Her landing was slightly disrupted, and both of their respective Byakugans registered the minor tearing of her left Achilles tendon. He charged forward, sending chakra out of his feet to walk on the sand like it was water. His right hand darted out, but the gentle fist strike was a feint, and instead he landed a weak roundhouse kick on her left knee. Hinata took a half step away, carefully, hiding her left leg from him. Doton, sedimentary jutsu, she inverted his maneuver, compacting the dirt and sand into a layer of stone. Then she kicked at his face with her left foot. Neji caught her leg, and tossed her again, increasing the damage to her ankle and knee. Hinata managed to tuck and roll as she fell, and as she stood, was obviously favoring her right stem. Now you are mixing the hard fist with gentle fist, she observed. The gentle fist lacks kicks and throws, he noted, his lowered body tensing. He hopped forward, his foot leading. Jump kicks were Guy's specialty, flashy, powerful, and somewhat dangerous to the user. Neji aimed for her midsection, counting on Hinata being slowed enough that she would not be able to avoid him. Hinata grabbed her left forearm with her right hand and blocked the kick with ginmaki. As soon as his foot touched, she forced it downward, dropping to one knee to put her weight onto his ankle. Neji's foot twisted oddly, both when it struck and again when it hit the ground. The instant his foot was on the ground, Hinata propelled herself back up, driving her right fist into his chin with every ounce of force her light frame could muster. The uppercut bowled Neji over, he landed on his butt with his face between his raised knees. She quickly started crafting hand seals, hoping to restore her leg before Neji recovered. His head snapped up, recognizing her technique. Neji surged to his feet, spinning as he went. 8 trigrams palm's heavenly spin, he announced, taking advantage of her commitment to the jutsu, counting on that to prevent her from countering with the Rasengan. The expanding sphere of power struck the startled Kunoichi, knocking her back. As she collided with the ground, the pale beauty was careful to roll so that she didn't hit her injured leg too hard. Looks like Neji took care of that glass jaw, Choji commented before taking another bite of his sandwich. Yes, Guy stated proudly, we did some special training for that. Neji sighed slightly as his rotation ended. He kept his distance, watching Hinata carefully. Please, stay down, he said kindly. Hinata drifted gracefully to her feet without a word, and faced him angrily. A long cut on the right side of her forehead loosed blood down into the eye below, which she held tightly shut. No, my brother, she shook her head, that is nowhere near enough to stop me. Neji briefly wondered how half of her Suijin Byakugan compared to his normal Byakugan, not that blood or a closed eye would inhibit her vision in any way. She wiped her face quickly on the sleeve of her shirt, and faced him again with both eyes open. She dropped back into the gentle fist stance, waiting for him to move. Though he could see the injuries to her knee and ankle had not been repaired, she was no longer favoring her right leg. The Jonin frowned slightly and matched her posture. But this will end it, he told her confidently, also with a touch of regret. A seal spread out from his feet, encompassing almost half of the arena floor. 8 trigrams, he incanted, stepping off the duality symbol to meet her. In the stands, Hyuga stood, and moved to the edge of the Hokage's box with a look of triumph. 2 palms, 4 palms, 8 palms, his fingers darted in at amazing speed, aiming for chakra points all throughout her system. He moved to her side, and continued. 16 palms, he slid behind her. 32 palms, he completed the circuit, standing in front of her again. 64 palms, Neji grimaced slightly, finishing, 128 palms. The seal broke apart, and the 2 cousins just stood there, facing one another. The crowd collectively held its breath in anticipation. I am sorry, Neji, Hinata said gently, and her opponent slid down onto one knee, no longer able to stand. For a moment, Hyuta's face went slack with surprise, but he recovered quickly, bristling with anger. What is going on? Why is Neji down? He demanded of no one in particular, then he pointed his finger at Hinata on the arena floor. You cheated, didn't you, girl? Someone helped you. Back off, old man, Naruto growled, with none of the affection he used when calling Hiashi or Tsuki, old man. The blonde teen jumped to his feet, glaring up at the Hyuga elder. It's not Hinata's fault you couldn't see or hear what happened, Uzumaki shouted. If you're blind without your Byakugan, maybe you should leave it on all the time. How dare you? Hyuta sniffed imperiously, using the advantage of their respective positions to look down on Naruto literally, as well as figuratively. Even I couldn't see the whole thing, Kakashi said, turning his face up so Hinata could observe his uncovered Sharingan, but Hinata blocked or avoided at least half of Neji's strikes, while every one of hers was spot on. 8 trigrams, Neji incanted, his right foot leaving the center of the seal. 2 palms, he started his barrage, his left hand angling towards Hinata's right shoulder, while his right shot towards a chakra point above her heart. She shifted her stance slightly, so that he missed the chakra point in her shoulder, though he still scored a minor cut into the muscle. At the same time, she gently tapped his other hand aside with her wrist, so that he missed entirely. 8 trigrams, she whispered, the smaller, purple circle spreading out from her foundation, lost in Neji's overpowering green. 4 palms, he struck her left side where he intended to, but both of the blows to her arms were deflected, and the strike at her liver did not hit anything vital due to her movement. 2 volts, her own arms darted out, scoring hits on his right lung and hip. She had returned to her guard position before he completed the next statement. 8 palms. This time Neji was slightly more successful, landing 5 of his 8 attacks where he intended to, though all of the remaining 3 failed to connect. Chakra pulse, 4 volts, Hinata intoned softly, restoring her chakra flow, before landing 2 hits on his left lung, 1 on his stomach, and the last on his right arm. The duration of the opposing techniques was much the same. The 8 palms level was Neji's most triumphant set in terms of hit percentage, but Hinata landed every strike, while occasionally undoing the damage he inflicted on her chakra network. 128 palms, Neji panted the verbal seal slightly, completing the technique more on determination and momentum than anything else. 32 volts, Hinata announced the final strike at the same time her cousin did, but completed it before he did. As with each other stage, her strikes all hit, even while avoiding or deflecting 67 of his 128 attacks. Neji struggled to remain upright, but both his chakra and nervous systems were in a disarray, and he had taken almost as many minor cuts to his muscles and organs as Hinata had, but the damage she inflicted was also more critical. Hinata is faster, the copy ninja concluded, referencing Lee and Naruto's earlier debate, so by using a slower, simpler technique, she was able to attack and defend at the same time. Hyuga stared down his nose at Kakashi for a moment, and then sat back down, hiding a look of smug satisfaction. Ignoring the pain and disrupted motor control, Neji forced himself back upright. He could not lift his arms, but nevertheless he squared himself against Hinata. I cannot lose, he whispered, setting aside the leadership of the clan, my engagement with Tenten is also at stake here. Hinata's face darkened, and she quickly closed the gap between them, shouting, gentle step twin lion fists. The chakra feline surrounding Hinata's left hand bit lightly into Neji's right shoulder, and the other predator clamped down on his left hip. She lifted him into the air, using his body and the form of her jutsu to hide her face. Please, surrender, Neji, she pleaded loudly, and then murmured, is that what our grandfather told you? His head dipped, and she took the motion for an affirmative. You can barely breathe, and if you try too hard, you might do permanent damage to your lungs, she yelled for the crowd, and then said softly, that is a lie. Your relationship is entirely safe. Don't make me finish this jutsu, she cried out, added sotto voce, I overheard my father and Aunt Hiroko talking 2 months ago. She was representing the elders, and was asking father to encourage you to propose to Tenten. His eyes widened, he knew all too well that the will of the elders was the will of Hinata. The damage to your limbs will take months to heal, she shouted at him, while really saying, grandfather is fascinated by her lineage. Her mix of Uchiha and Takamaki blood means a better chance your children will have the Byakugan, or possibly a Byakugan Sharingan hybrid. You might never fully recover, she implored him, then whispered, grandfather would never try to separate you two, unless he was disappointed in your offspring. But if you don't give up, I will incapacitate you, she told him earnestly, her secret monologue completed, if that is what it takes to protect my relationship, I will break you, my brother. Neji considered her words for a moment. He did not think she would lie to him, and what she said fit with what he knew. Tenten's father had been born into the Uchiha clan, though without the Sharingan. Her mother was a Takamaki, a cousin of the leader of the Hyuga's former servants. There was a long-standing feud between the two families, so when Tenten's parents fell in love, they quit their respective clans so they could marry without interference. That was reason his fiancée lacked a family name. It made sense that Hinata would want him to marry someone with the latent genetics for not one, but two of the legendary dojutsu. I concede, he announced for the crowd, his head dropping. At first, Hinata thought it was an act as part of his surrender. But as she set him down, she realized he had lost consciousness. She looked up at the Hokage's box, worried. Okay, let's get some medics down there, Tsunade barked, the winner is Hinata Hyuga. Hinata smiled faintly, concerned she had hurt Neji more than she needed to. She swayed slightly as she straightened. She was exhausted, nearly out of chakra, woozy from the head injury, and had lost a not insubstantial measure of blood. All right, Naruto bellowed triumphantly, punching the air as he jumped to his feet. He started to run back down to the arena, but was interrupted. Stop, Hinata Hyuga barked, amplifying his voice with a minor genjutsu. Just where do you think you are going, Uzumaki? I'm going to congratulate Hinata, Naruto shouted back. I don't think so. The Hyuga elder shook his head smugly. As per the terms of our arrangement, Hinata's inheritance is forfeit, as is her relationship with you. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.